again, everybody. I'm Bill. That's Ryan, and we're BSing Sports. It's great to have you here. Today, we're going to go back to a little bit of our roots, what we really wanted to do, and just sit here and BS Sports. So, I'm just going to get right into it. Ryan, fire away, man.
Yeah, so the first topic that we're going to cover is any, recent MLB news that's going on, anything around the league, anything outstanding, exciting, depressing, anything in between. So we're going to cover the fact that, Hall of Famer Willie Mays honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Congratulations. Good for Willie. Bill, we have some news on George Springer. How's he doing?
So apparently George Springer is close to making his Blue Jays debut. Today is Saturday. The last report I read was on Thursday afternoon, and they said that he could possibly play this weekend. The Blue Jays haven't played yet today, so I don't have a definitive answer on that. But hopefully it'll be this weekend. The Blue Jays could use him back in the lineup. He's going to be a huge bat for them. He's going to be a huge contribution to them. It's really needed. And like I said, he's probably excited not to be in an Astros uniform right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. Other injured MLB outfielders, Cody Bellinger. What's going on with him?
So he got a leg injury, minor bone fracture. He was diving back to first base, or I'm sorry, he was running to first base, and the pitcher for the Athletics, I don't have his name off the top of my head, threw a ball that was a little low, hit him in the leg, and now he's got a small bone fracture. That was on April 5th, and he's frustrated with how long it's taking to heal. The doctor's telling him he has to wait, even though he feels fine, because everybody heals differently. So again, he's just frustrated with how long it's taking for his leg to heal. But again, same situation as George Springer's thing. Once the Dodgers get him back, the already really good Dodgers get him back, they'll be even better.
Yeah, I'm sure they're missing him, but their 14-4 record doesn't really show it. Speaking of the Dodgers' 14-4 record, I hear you have some displeasure about the ESPN power rankings with the MLB. Why don't you go into detail about that?
So I like where the Dodgers are. I believe they're the best team in baseball right now. We've had this conversation several times. The Dodgers are the Dodgers.
I agree.
And the Padres at number 2 makes sense. They played the Dodgers 8 times in 2 weeks, and they've held their own. I mean, it doesn't look that way. Dodgers are 14-4, but they had a big walk-off win last night, I believe the Padres did. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a joke because they have the 7-6 New York Mets ranked 4th in the league, where teams like the Boston Red Sox, who Ryan and I were not high on, we weren't high on them, started off the season super hot at 12-7, and they've got them ranked 3 spots below the Mets. So I just think the ESPN power rankings is an absolute freaking joke, and they need to do something better with the way they're putting it out there.
So I kind of agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, the season's still a little young, and they're power rankings, and they're more so based on the roster and at this point the potential rather than the results. And that's just the way that I look at it. But I agree. Also, I was kind of high on the Red Sox. I had them taking a wild card spot behind the Rays.
That's right. Yeah.
I had them taking the second wild card spot in the AL actually. So, but or they were competing for it, if I remember right. They were really close. I said, depending on when Chris Sale comes back.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, I agree. I don't think the Mets ever should have been 4th. I mean, that's kind of a repeating pattern with them. They have this great roster on paper, and year after year, they just can't stay healthy, or anybody not named Degrom just doesn't produce. And we'll get a little bit more into him later. But moving on from just general MLB news. So Aaron Nola for the Phillies is pitching tonight. We get to watch that again. Spun a gem, an absolute beauty. His last start beat Cardinals 2-0 in his first 9-inning complete game shutout of his career. He seems to have silenced a lot of people talking about he's not an ace, or maybe he still has to earn the title. Bill, what's your take on that? Do you think he's an ace? And where do you think he ranks amongst MLB pitchers?
So let me start this by saying, yes, Aaron Nola is inconsistent at times. But what he does is he'll go out there and he'll throw a gem like he did against the Cardinals last Sunday. And then he'll put together 7 or 8 really good starts following that. But he had a slow start to the season. So like you said, there was a lot of chatter that said Nola's not an ace. He really isn't as good as he was in his 2017 form. And I don't think that's true at all. I do believe he's an ace. Since 2018, Aaron Nola is 35-19 on what's been a really unimpressive Philadelphia Phillies team. I couldn't find the stat on how many times he left the game with the lead in that span, but I'm sure it was more than 10 at least. So you can add 10 wins to his total just by that alone. Having said that, in that span, he's got a 3.08 ERA and a 1.10 WHIP, 67 more strikeouts than innings pitched, and over that span, he leads all of Major League Baseball in innings pitched, 1 out ahead of Garrett Cole. of the Yankees and 5 more outs than Jacob Degrom of the Mets. Now, Degrom pitched 6 less games, but still. Again, we'll go into Degrom a little bit more in a few seconds. Like I said, he does get inconsistent, especially in September. But anytime he goes out there, and this is what I think makes an ace, anytime he goes out there, you believe as a fan, as the team, like you believe that you have a shot at winning the game just because he's on the hill. So that's an ace in my opinion.
I kind of agree with your statement, actually. Only mostly. This is going to surprise some people. In the definition of ace, as in there's 30 teams in baseball, and each person at the top of the rotation is a number one. Yes, Aaron Nola is by far a top 30 pitcher in the MLB. I think he's top 10, without a doubt. So I believe in that aspect, he's an ace. However, if you compare him, not just the numbers, but you watch him pitch, you compare him to a Degrom, you compare him to a Cole or, a Bieber, a Kershaw. To me, Nola's missing something. He's missing. There's a wow factor that just isn't there with him. That's with other guys, and I don't know if that's just his personality. Something to me is missing from Aaron Nola's game, and I think that's why people even question that he's an ace.
Is it a 100-mile-an-hour fastball?
I don't know, that there's something different about Aaron Nola. He's got the numbers outside of September where he has a career 4.27 ERA, which is not good. To be an ace, and in September, one of the most important months in baseball, your team's vying for a playoff spot, you need to be better than 4.27, plain and simple. Have to be, which is about 6 1/3 innings and 3 earned runs every start. Now on paper that doesn't sound that bad, but when you're an ace, you're expected to go out there and do better than 6 1/3 and 3 earned in starts that matter. For example, his last start where he spun a gem. This is where I hope to see that he turns the corner and gets that factor. The Phillies needed a win. They needed a series win. They needed him to come out and pitch great, and that's exactly what he did. And that's what aces do. When their number's called, we need a great start from you. He went out there and he did it. And hopefully, he brings that wow factor to him. Maybe it's a personality thing. I don't know. I still think he's a top 10 pitcher in baseball, but I would put him like a tier below Degrom, Cole, even Kershaw at this point. Kershaw still pitches well. Can't really stay healthy, but that's debatable. But to me, he's a tier below those guys, but I would still definitely call him top 10.
Okay. I'd probably put him somewhere in the top 10 as well, behind the same guys that you put him at. I didn't answer that second part of the question. That's pretty much it.
Okay. So speaking of pitchers, we're going to be doing a little bit of, like couch debating like you do with your buddies at home, sit down, drink a beer. Somebody says something and you start arguing about it. So we're going to debate who we think the best pitcher is currently and the best pitcher of all time is. Now, currently, Bill, who do you think the best pitcher is? I don't think this is going to be a debate that lasts.
Yeah, so this one's not going to be a debate. We've already mentioned his name twice in this episode, and we haven't even really talked about anything special. Jacob Degrom is the best pitcher in baseball. Last night, he struck out, 14 or 15 batters, 9 inning complete game shutout against the Washington Nationals. And this is just very par for the course for Jacob Degrom. He's plagued by a bad team in the New York Mets. As Ryan pointed out, they've year after year had talent on the roster. And again, same thing. I couldn't find the statistic for how many times he led the game or only gave up 1 run and still lost. I couldn't find those statistics. But anyway, Jacob Degrom, 71 of 52 career, again, plagued by the Mets with a 2.72 career ERA. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is an ace.
Yeah, that guy's a stud. So I read his stat line for this season. His stat line is 4 games, all started, obviously. 29 innings pitched. He's allowed 13 hits, 1 earned run, which is a solo home run. He lost that game 1-0, go figure, as you just talked about. That's his only loss in the year. So the 1 earned run, he's walked 3 guys, and he's only struck out 50 batters in 29 innings. So very, very pedestrian and mediocre numbers there, I would say. And I think his season ERA is 0.31.
That's what it is, 0.31. Also, funny stat there on the Degrom situation. He's given up 1 earned run the entire season, and as a pitcher, he has 2 RBIs.
And last night, like you said, he pitched a 2-hit shutout. He had 2 hits himself. He almost out-hit the team that he pitched against. So this guy, he's a stud. He's it's undebatable. he is the number one pitcher of baseball. You can debate about number two, Bieber, Cole, Kershaw, whoever you want. Number two is a debate. Number one is not. And but like I said, this is nothing. Now the best all-time pitcher, however, we may disagree on. Bill, who do you have?
So it's actually funny. I went, my face is a little red. I'm sure you guys all noticed. I went golfing this morning with my brother-in-law, and we got into a very heated debate about who we both think the best pitcher of all time would be. He is adamantly against my choice, and I think Ryan has his choice, if I'm not mistaken. We had a small discussion about it the other night. But I'm not going best pitcher all time because, you got the Walter Johnsons and stuff like that, guys that I wasn't able to watch in the early 1900s and stuff like that. You got lefty Steve Carlton, who was absolutely phenomenal, but Ryan and I weren't old enough to watch those guys. So I chose a pitcher that I was actually able to watch games that I had went to at at Veterans Stadium and watch the Atlanta Braves come in and just pound on the Phillies. My pick here would be Greg Maddux, 355 and 227 record over his entire career, 3.16 ERA. This is a guy who, when he first came up in the bigs, he was throwing 93 to 95 miles an hour. He had a good changeup, but then he lost all of his velocity and had to learn to pitch again. And he did really, really well. So my opinion, best pitcher of all time. I do have an honorable mention here, but my best pitcher of all time would be Greg Maddux.
Okay, so it looks like we're not going to debate much on this one either. Greg Maddux is my pick as well. And, being a guy who is, a pitcher, I was bred, location. That's the most important thing about pitching. And nobody personifies that more than Greg Maddux because, like you said, once he lost all his velocity, he had to relearn how to pitch. He had to learn how to move the ball. He had to learn how to locate it where he wanted to. That's exactly what he did. And what's not talked about enough is he pitched dead in the middle of the steroid era, throwing 86-mile-an-hour fastballs. That sounds like a feast to hitters until you look at some of these numbers. Like in 1994, he had a 1.56 ERA. 95, he had a 1.63. And 1998, 2.22. I mean, this guy threw 88 miles an hour, and he was feasting in the middle of the steroid era. To boot, Greg Maddux has a career 3.26 ERA in the postseason, I believe. It's something really minuscule like that as well. And it's only gotten better at each level of the postseason. In the World Series, he has a career 2.09 ERA. I mean, granted, his record's 2-3, but when you have a 2.09 ERA, it sounds like that's not really your fault. So to me, it is Greg Maddux as far as pitchers that I've seen. Pitchers that I haven't seen, I'm a big fan of Warren Spahn. I also like Walter Johnson, like those guys. I mean, but at the same time, Walter Johnson pitched in the dead ball era. So it's a little bit more difficult to, kind of include those guys in that conversation. But he does lead all pitchers all time in shutouts with 110. So that's definitely worth noting.
I'm actually going to give my brother-in-law's take on this one because he also was a pitcher. He pitched in college. His take on it was Pedro Martinez. And his thought process was he still pitched at the end of the steroid era. And in 2002 and 2002, Pedro went 24-4 with like a 2.02 ERA. And this is in the division with the Yankees. And then in 2003, he went 18-4 or something like that with like a 1.98 ERA. So Pedro deserves to be an honorable mention here. Absolutely. I just think when, like Ryan pointed out, when you take the entire career into context and you're looking at what he did from beginning to end, Greg Maddux, I think, adapted better than I think Pedro did. Once Pedro lost his velocity, he lost a lot of his intimidation.
And that's what I was going to say. Pedro's obviously not to be discluded, but I think, from a certain standpoint, like Greg Maddux, early on in his career didn't have, that weapon where you've 98, 99 miles an hour, you can reach back and blow it by guys. Like he never, very early on in his career, he lost the ability to do that. And that, so he had to really, reconfigure pitching without that weapon, and maybe there's something to be said for, well, Pedro could do that. So that's why he is better. And that's why this is a debate, it's all opinionated. But to me, I feel like it's more valuable to be able to get guys out without having that extra weapon than is. But I mean, Pedro's definitely, he's easily one of the top 5 pitchers I've ever seen. So
absolutely. I do have 2 other honorable mentions, but so they're very specific. So one of them is a specific season, and one of them is a very specific month. I know you guys are going to call me homers because I'm a Phillies fan, and that's wonderful, and I don't care. But we need just for a second to touch on Cliff Lee in June of 2011. He pitched 5 games. He went 5-0 with a .21 ERA. he had just one earned run over all 5 starts, and he had 3 complete games shutouts in that span. That's the best consecutive set of pitching performances I've ever seen in my life. And I was fortunate enough to go to 2 of those games, so that was wonderful too.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a whole lot like what Degrom's got going on right now. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about, Degrom stats this year, I mean, obviously, if we base Degrom being the best pitcher in baseball off of what he's done, just, not these 4 starts. But, I mean, if you want to talk about that specific month, yeah, I actually think I remember that month. He was second in command to Roy Halladay on that staff. So, I mean, Roy brought most of the attention. But I do remember Lee going off in June. I remember that vaguely, but
the other pitcher I wanted to bring up was 2015 Zach Greinke. He went 19-3 with a 1.66 ERA, .844 WHIP. So I actually don't remember a whole lot about that season for the Dodgers in 2015. But I do remember watching Zach Greinke. I mean, everybody does fantasy baseball and everything, and he was on my team that year. So I remember watching several of his games, and I don't know what happened from then till now. I know that he's still a good pitcher now, but that version of Zach Greinke, like when he came to the Hill, there was zero doubt in my mind or in a lot of people's minds, the Dodgers are walking out of there with a win.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a former boss of mine who's at a different base now about Zach Greinke, and we were talking about how he was almost out of baseball really early in his career. He dealt with a lot of anxiety issues, and he was down in the minors for a long time, and there was talk that he wasn't going to come back. And then, the following season, Sports Illustrated has him on the cover because, he's just dominating baseball. I think he started out that year 8-0 or something like that, like a sub-2 ERA. He just came out of blew everybody out of the water. And then he went on to make a good point, and he said, at this point in his career, Zach Greinke has a chance to be more like Jamie Moyer. Jamie Moyer pitched like way into his 40s, and obviously, Jamie Moyer wasn't great in his 40s, but I mean, the fact that he was still on major league clubs in his mid 40s was impressive enough. And Greinke's got a chance to do that. He talked about abandoning his slider this year, but he's pitching very well, kind of like the Greg Maddux-esque, how he's reinvented himself a little bit. He's more focused on the location, and I honestly don't doubt it. Like, just the way that this guy has transformed himself, he looks like a different pitcher than he did early on in his career, and he's stayed successful. So I could see it for sure. And I think even if Greinke were to retire today, there's a case that he could be in the Hall of Fame. So if he does that for another 6 or 7 years, then I think there's no doubt.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, wholeheartedly, dude. I mean, Greinke's a beast. There's no other way around it. So pitchers, obviously, we just talked about pitchers. Can't not talk about the hitters. Best current hitter in baseball. Another 30-second debate here, Bill.
I mean, I don't even know why we got to bring all right. So Mike Trout's the best hitter in baseball right now. Mike Trout is the best baseball player in baseball. He's probably one of the best baseball players in the history of the game. I'd put him up there with the Mantles. I really would.
Not yet. He's on trajectory, but not yet.
Okay, trajectory alone, I'd put him up there. What he brings to the game, I mean, I know he's not ambidextrous, but what he brings to the game is energy and ability, and he wants to do it all. He doesn't just want to go out there and hit bombs. He doesn't want to just go out there and hang out in left field and just catch flies and maybe throw some people out. He wants to be the center of attention at all times, and because of that, he just has this energy about him that's amazing. But I mean, he's hitting 305 for his career. That's awesome. Career 300. You're talking every 3 times he goes to the plate, he's getting a hit. 308 home runs, 810 RBIs in 9 seasons, and one of them is COVID shortened. So I mean, he misses 300 at bats last year. The number could be significantly higher. So again, 30-second debate because Mike Trout is the best hitter in baseball right now.
Yeah, and he has a lot of back injuries from carrying that organization, over the last few years. Kind of heavy. Their payroll's kind of large, and they're not doing a whole lot. So, but to touch on Mike Trout, you can sit there and tell me till you're blue in the face, oh, he's only been in 3 playoff games his whole career. Like, yeah. Do you watch baseball at all? Like, have you seen a baseball game? There's 8 other guys out there at the same time, and like I just said, that organization, especially on the pitching staff, has done a terrible job of putting talent on the field. I mean, as soon as they took that Pujols contract and he fell on his face, the organization was doomed. So they're trying to make up for it. Rendon, Ohtani, they got some sticks in the lineup. I like David Fletcher. Andrew Heaney's finally coming around the pitch. Dylan Bundy had a good year, but I mean, still for years and years, Mike Trout and I think he's only hitting 393 this year. I think his OPS is like close to 1200. So yeah, he's the best hitter, and I agree, best all around baseball player. He's lost a step over the last couple of years, but I mean, who hasn't? When closer you get to 30, the slower you're going to be. And he's been robbed of a Gold Glove, I think, a couple times in his career. I think he should have a few of those by now, but he's still searching for the first.
I do have an honorable mention on that one, and the guy's been in the league for many, many years. A couple years back, he did something that hadn't been done in 40 years and won the Triple Crown. Just figure I should bring it up. Miguel Cabrera needs to be in the conversation. If Mike Trout's not on the field constantly day in and day out, I probably would have went Miguel Cabrera. But because of Mike Trout being in the league, that's where I'm at. But again, Miguel Cabrera a couple years back not a couple years, I guess it was almost 7 years ago now, won the Triple Crown.
Yeah, time's flying by. I feel like that was, a couple years ago too. And then I started thinking about it after you said it. I was like, man, I think that was like 2011 or 2012 or something like that.
Man, it was that. It was long ago, yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like yesterday he's playing third base for the Marlins. So
yeah, I was watching videos of him playing third base for the Marlins.
Yeah, and I was also watching some videos and over time, and it's a good thing he moved to first base. He was never really a great fielder to begin with, but I mean, we're talking about hitting, and that's one thing Miguel Cabrera is very good at is hitting. And Pujols has got to be up there. So I mean, obviously not since he's been with the Angels, but I think he was just so dominant with the Cardinals. Like, I mean, he was unavoidable. Like, that guy was the best hitter in the early 2000s. Like, no doubt about it.
I remember when Ryan Howard beat Albert Pujols out for the MVP, and the Phillies didn't make the playoffs that year. What was it, 2007, 2006? 2006.
Yeah, six.
Yeah, and Albert Pujols was really mad, said that if your team doesn't make the playoffs, you shouldn't be considered for MVP. But
yeah, and then the Cardinals went on to win the World Series that year too, which made it even a little bit.
I know, which is funny. I mean, but I guess Pujols could probably be in that conversation. I just distinctly remember him complaining that Howard won the MVP that year.
Yeah, wasn't it David Eckstein that won the World Series MVP? He's like shorter than me. He's like 5'7", 5'8", little shortstop dude. I remember him. Yeah, I remember that World Series. It was a good World Series. Now from current players, we're going to move on to all time. This should be a debate because from what I'm looking at here, we do not have the same people. So, Bill, why don't you go ahead and tell me who you think the best hitter of all time is?
All right, so look, best hitter of all time that I was not ever able to see. You get to see some black and white flashbacks. You get to read up on them. One of these guys has a couple of books where he's training young guys to learn how to hit. I actually read one when I was in Little League. Obviously, you got to talk about Babe Ruth, the great Bambino, or Ted Williams. But again, those are guys that I couldn't watch, so I don't really have a whole lot of information that I want to share on them because it wasn't something that I ever got to see and get excited about. The best hitter that I ever got to see, Ken Griffey Jr. Now, I know his career lifetime average was 283, but he had 630 home runs. He dealt with a ton of injuries. Had he not dealt with those injuries, I fully believe that he probably would hold the most home runs in history record above Barry Bonds, and I truly mean that. But just talking about Ken Griffey Jr., the thing that stands out the most to me was that absolutely gorgeous swing that he had. Like, every kid everywhere while I was growing up tried to mimic that swing just because of how absolutely gorgeous it was. So in my opinion, that's the best hitter I ever got to see.
Yeah, I mean, the kid, every time you say the kid, people know you're talking about Griffey Jr. I mean, and the game where him and his pop went back to back or whatever, he was 19, his dad was 40. That's the type of thing, that happens in baseball. It's funny because yesterday, was the anniversary of Fernando Tatis Sr. hit his 2 grand slams in one inning at Dodger Stadium. And last night, on the 22nd anniversary, his son, Fernando Tatis Jr., hit 2 home runs at Dodger Stadium. So baseball makes up stories that you just can't even write about. So, but I agree that you mentioned some pretty good hitters, but as far as hitters that I haven't seen, I got to give it to Mantle, man. Switch hitting's a tough business. And Mickey Mantle, save it, Braves fans. He was the best. I don't want to hear that Chipper Jones stuff. Mantle, could hit for power from both sides in an era where power wasn't a big thing. That he was line-to-line hitter. Career average of 300, on base over 400%, or 400, excuse me, which is 40%. I mean, the guy did everything on the field. He wasn't super fast, and he led the league in strikeouts a few times, but we're talking OPSs close to 1,200 in an era where that just didn't even exist. So to me, it's Mantle. And like I said, hitting from both sides of the plate is hard to do. And the fact that he was able to do that, if he had not gotten hurt toward the end of his career and had some bad knee issues, that he would have had a better career than I think he already did. And that's saying a lot. So to me, it's Mantle, but that's because mostly it's because he's a switch hitter. And that's basically two separate good hitters into one. My honorable mention for, somebody who I didn't really get to watch play a whole lot, at least not in their prime, was Tony Gwynn. He did hit 415 off of a guy that we agree was the best pitcher of all time in Greg Maddux. So that says something alone. But yeah, I mean, Gwynn was striking out 20 times a year in an era where, strikeouts really started to spike. This dude put the ball in play almost every time he swung the bat. So, and his strike zone recognition from all the videos that I've watched is second to none. The dude was a good hitter. And, he maybe not have had like a ton of power, but he knew how to put the ball in play, and he knew how to hit it where the defense wasn't, something that these current hitters should probably figure out. I read an article today that the shift ruined Jay Bruce's career. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Jay Bruce not knowing how to adjust to the shift ruined Jay Bruce's career.
Yes.
So
now look, I'm not a fan of the shift at all. I really think they should get rid of it, but I don't think that's what ruined Jay Bruce's career.
Yeah, it's not like the guy was hitting 330 early in his career, and then they were like, crap, let's move the shortstop to the other side of second base. That'll really show him. I mean, what was he, a 270 hitter his whole career?
Yeah, not much higher than that.
I think the highlight of his career is taking a walk against Roy Halladay in the first game of the postseason in 2010. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Jay Bruce, honestly, and not to take anything away from him. He had a decent power stroke, but when I think Jay Bruce, I think, man, if only Roy Halladay had struck that dude out.
Yeah. I mean, he still went on to throw a no-hitter, but whatever.
Yeah, second in postseason history.
Yeah.
So and mind you guys, baseball's been around since 1869. So the fact there's only been two is. Anyway, we're going to move on to the NFL because there's a rumor out there that I saw. Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about this rumor?
So is it still just a rumor, or was it confirmed yesterday?
I saw that it was like a leaked photo of like a fax that came through for a draft day trade. That's the lead that I have on it. I haven't followed up on it at all. In case you guys haven't noticed, I'm buried in a corner. That's because I'm in the corner of a hotel room. I'm doing some road traveling this weekend, so I haven't really had much time to look up anything. But yeah, that's what I heard on this. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
So yeah, right now there is a rumor going out that the Packers are sending Jordan Love, the quarterback they picked up in the first round last year, pick 29, which is their first round pick, and pick 142 to the Patriots for the 15 pick this year. Very big rumor. Again, I thought it was confirmed. I'm looking for it right now. I can't find it, so maybe it wasn't. But this is just something Bill Belichick does. I don't know how else to describe the whole situation. So like he just calls every organization that he thinks has somebody that he could use and just finds a way to get them. I feel like he's been doing it for years.
Yeah, I think as soon as Aaron Rodgers performed the way that he did last year, he kind of sat there and was like, maybe they don't have a need for Jordan Love. So he probably, if this is the case, if this is a real draft day trade, I could definitely see how like Belichick might have initiated this, because I don't think he likes Cam. I think Cam was just the easier option for him to take at the time in the offseason. But I'm not high on Cam. I don't think many people are. I've never been high on Cam. I know people love Cam. He kind of re-revolutionized the running of the quarterback, and I'm like, well, that's what got him hurt. And now he can't throw the ball at all. I think he had 8 touchdown passes last year. So,
yeah, I think he rushed for 6 and threw 8, which I mean,
it was.
He played all 16 games.
It was something grossly pathetic for an NFL quarterback, to be honest with you. And that's putting it lightly. So I do not think. I mean, he's definitely not the answer to the future up there. But I think Belichick going to get somebody like a Jordan Love or something along those lines, because I don't think there are going to be top tier quarterbacks available at 15 overall. There's my dad and I were talking about, there's rumors that the draft, like for top 12 picks, all 5 of those first round quarterbacks are going to be gone. So who knows? I mean, maybe the Pats don't want to trade up in the draft. They think they're giving up too much capital for that. Instead, they'll trade back and take Jordan Love off the Packers' hands, who, I mean, maybe they'll keep Rodgers for another 5 years. Who knows? He shows like he can play it. But I think that'd be a win for both sides because I think the Packers need to move up and get some serious talent in the draft.
There's another rumor going around. This one's been swirling since the Eagles traded back to the 12th pick. So they had originally had the 6th pick. They trade back to the 12th pick, obviously. Now there's a rumor they're trying to get back up to the 7th pick. I've read it several times on different websites. This just doesn't make sense to me. If you wanted the pick so bad, why the heck did you trade out of it? Like, so if you're going to tell me that Howie Roseman has he's the smartest person in every room, or he has to be the smartest person in every room, just try and explain the logic behind getting out of the 6 to trade the picks, to get picks, to trade picks, to get back to the 7. It logically just doesn't stand.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't hear what pick it was. I know there's a rumor talking about they're trying to get into the top 10, but if you traded back from 6 just to move back to 7, and if you virtually give up the same thing you got, then what was the point to begin with? I don't quite understand that. But I would be okay with them, moving back into the top 10 if he can somehow manage to keep one of those keep the first round picks that he just got for it. I don't think that's possible, but I mean, who knows? Maybe there's some talent on the roster they give up along with it. Not that we have many options there either, but mostly his fault. Mostly his fault. All of the talent that's still on the roster was drafted by Chip Kelly. So,
yeah. Oh God.
Miles Sanders was a good pick.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I mean, he was grossly underutilized. So
we had that conversation last week. Miles Sanders, most of the guys just not being utilized correctly on the team. Miles Sanders being underutilized. But
so, with that being said, it leads into our next question. What final pre-draft surprises? Predictions. What do you think happens?
I think Trevor Lawrence goes first overall. No,
dude, that would shock me.
I don't know about predictions. As for surprises, I guess it is kind of a prediction. I actually think there's going to be 3 first-day draft trades. I don't know why. I just have this feeling, and I don't know who they're going to be. I can't tell you. I'm confident one of them will be the Pats. Just again, Bill Belichick doing Bill Belichick things over there. I think the Niners are also in the market to try and move up. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try and unload Jimmy Garoppolo on somebody. With a lot of other.
Send him to the Patriots.
That would be a heck of a story.
Yeah,
he would go to the Patriots and win.
Do you think Belichick would go for it?
He might. I mean, we discussed this before. Isn't Jimmy Garoppolo 21-5 when he starts games?
Yeah, but I think that's over the span of 6 years that he's been a starter. He's only played 26 games.
Yeah,
he's made it out of September once since he became a full-time starter.
But Belichick is better at. I mean, no offense to the coaches over there in San Francisco. I think Belichick would scheme to keep Garoppolo on his feet better than they did. That's just me. Now, decision making obviously comes into play there, and I get it. But I think Belichick would scheme better to get the ball out of his hand faster. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, San Fran's going quarterback. They wouldn't have traded to number 3 if they weren't. And I think they're going Trey Lance. I don't know. I have a gut feeling they're going Trey Lance at 3. We've heard all kinds of rumors of Fields and Mac Jones, but Trey Lance, I think, seems to be the guy at number 3, and that would be interesting too.
I thought it was Mac Jones.
Yeah. I don't know. People aren't high on Mac Jones, but I look at him and he reminds me a lot of Drew Brees. Not the big arm, but he's got good pocket presence and he knows where to get the football.
He's a little bigger than Drew Brees, though.
Yeah, he's a little bigger, but still, I mean, he's not mobile. He's not. He's more IQ than anything. So, and people are just not high on him, and I don't quite understand why. I think I think he could be a decent NFL quarterback. I mean, granted, he played on the best college team last year. I mean, they dominated everybody, but when your receivers are 10 yards behind the cornerbacks, it's easy I can throw the football to them. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where these guys go. But I think Trey Lance goes number 3. That's probably my most wild prediction because I think number 3 right now is probably the biggest question mark spot.
I think, and I guess it's not really a surprise prediction, but I think Devontae Smith falls out of the top 15.
Top 15.
Top 15. I don't even think the Eagles take him.
You think Jace Horn goes before Devontae Smith?
Yeah.
Think
Look,
it's the size?
we can go back and look at this and debate it on draft day.
Yeah. You think it's the size?
I do. He's really small. And so everybody says the Eagles are going to take him, and I just don't believe that. I really don't. They've already got Jalen Rager, who's small on the team. What point does it have to have a second guy like that?
No, I agree. I think if they were to pick one of the two, if they were both there, I think they'd go Waddle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if they have if Devontae Smith's the only one left, I think they go Devontae Smith. But I think if Jace Horn, Jalen Waddle, Pitts and Jamar Chase won't be there, so I'm not even going to discuss those. But yeah, I think if Horn, Waddle are still there, I think they take Waddle, Horn, Smith. I agree with that. Deshaun Jackson is the same size, and he's been plagued by injuries almost his entire career. So, moving on from that topic, though, Patrick Marleau passes, Gordy Howe, who has a hat trick named after him, in games played all time. Now he's number one. People look at longevity as something that gets you into the Hall of Fame. Bill, looking at the numbers, I don't see it. What's your take?
Yeah, so over his career, he's got five. You're talking 24 seasons. He's only got 566 goals, 631 assists. These aren't numbers that jump out at me over a 20 plus year career.
Yeah.
It's great that he's played 1,769 games. It's wonderful that he was able to stay healthy his entire career. Which I realize that when you're playing a professional sport like this, the most important thing is actually being on the ice, on the court, or on the field. So congratulations to him on getting here. But again, these are just stats that don't particularly jump off the page at you. You're talking 1,200 points. That's okay. That's nice, but
on face value, and then you look at it, and it's like, oh, well, I played 24 years. Well, okay, now it's not as nice.
Yeah, now you break it down, and you're talking averaging 60 points a season, which it's unimpressive to me. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Strictly, the statistics just aren't there. But again, congratulations to him for breaking the record, and he'll probably. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. He probably gets into the Hall of Fame strictly on that, and I don't agree with that precedent. But overall,
I'm curious as to how the Hall of Fame voters in hockey look at that, because if they weigh heavily on that, then I agree he might end up in the Hall of Fame. But at the same time, in my opinion, he's not, because Patrick Marleau to me is not a generational talent, and in the Hall of Fame, no matter what the sport needs to be saved for guys that revolutionize the game. Guys where you talk about the sport, you can't not mention their name. Like with hockey, it's Gretzky, Ovechkin, Crosby, McDavid's on his way there. These guys, their name just tied to the sport, Tom Brady in football, Peyton Manning, Dammer, these guys, you can't say their name without the sport without saying their name. And to me, Patrick Marleau, great second line center for his career. He's put up some good numbers, and the fact that he's managed to stay healthy playing a sport like hockey is pretty impressive. But yeah, I agree. No Hall of Fame here. But one of my classes, I'm in the middle of college right now. For those of you that don't know, one of my classes, our week 8 discussion was about salary caps, whether they actually work or not. So, Bill, I'm curious as to what your take on salary caps is, and do you think they work?
So my take on this, no, salary caps don't work. And the reason being is because you either have an organization like the Tampa Bay Rays, who just absolutely don't want to be anywhere near the salary cap, and they are consistently going out there with I know they keep winning, so it's hard to bash the organization right this second for it.
Yeah.
But they're consistently putting guys out there that just aren't exciting to watch. Now, again, they keep winning games, which is wonderful for them. And as a team, they're exciting to watch. But when I go to a baseball game, I want to see the Bryce Harpers and the excitement that he creates. I want to see the Mike Trouts and the excitement. So when you hold a team accountable for the salary cap, and some of them are always constantly pushing up against the brisk of it, and others are getting the same record and stuff, not even getting close to it, I just think there's a huge give and take there that I just don't like them.
Yeah,
I know I only talked about baseball, but so football, a lot of teams this year started because of the COVID situation last year, started over the salary cap and they had to work to get back down under it. That alone isn't really fair to the organization. It's out of their hands that COVID happened. And now all of a sudden they're handcuffed to try and get these contracts that they signed 3-4 years ago under control. And if players like Tyreek Hill don't want to re-sign them, which I mean, again, he's more than welcome to do that. You handcuff the organization into trying to cut good players, having to cut good players, again, like the Chiefs who cut 2 all-pro offensive tackles because they couldn't pay them anymore. I just think you're handcuffing teams in a negative slight, especially after last season and everything that went down last season.
Yeah, I see your point 100%, but at the same time, that's the risk you take with signing a contract at any point. Anything can happen.
You don't predict things like COVID. Like, you don't predict your entire stadium not being able to sell out for 8 games a season. These are non-predictables. Like, I understand you have to predict for injuries and you have to predict for retirement and you have to predict for a storm coming through and destroying the stadium for some reason, X, Y, and Z. Like, you have to predict for some stuff, but you don't predict for an entire season and not have a single fan in the stand. And then the NFL decided, oh, well, now we're going to drop the salary cap by, what was it, $54 million? It was a significant chunk this year.
Yeah, I think from what it was projected to be versus what it ended up being. So I think it only actually dropped like 10 or 12 million, but I think it was projected to be like 40 million from the year prior. So somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah. So I mean, again, you're handcuffing teams that going into last season, they were like, okay, we might be tight this year, but we have space next year. And now it's, oh, we were tight this year. Now we got to cut this year. Because of that, it's frustrating to watch a salary cap situation in sports.
And I see your point, like I said, but at the same time, like, as a front office, you got to be prepared for anything, especially now that this happened. Like, you look at this situation in the face and you're like, okay, now I really have to be prepared for anything that can happen. And that's the risk you run with signing a contract, just like on the player side, like you get these players, who tend to be prima donnas about it, but they outperform their contract. And then they start sitting out here. Well, I need more money. No, you ran the risk. You signed this deal right here. You're going to uphold this deal. So, okay. But it to me, salary caps do work and they don't. The only sport, as far as I know, that has a salary cap minimum is the NHL, and I like that idea because it does, like you touched on earlier, like owners in baseball are the worst owners in any sport, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But with the minimum salary cap, you at least have to have some decent players on your team. You have to have some reasons why your fans are going to show up and watch the game in the first place. But as far as a maximum goes, I see the only issue with it, like in baseball, as some of you may not know, there is no hard salary cap in baseball. There's a luxury tax threshold, which I believe is 7% on every dollar over the tax threshold is what the owner has to pay. So if you're $1 million over the luxury tax, you pay an extra 70 grand, which by the time I got done saying that sentence, an MLB owner made 70 grand. He doesn't care about 70 grand. That's my issue with it is these big cities, your LA Dodgers, your New York Yankees, these owners don't care about paying 7% on a dollar. That they're going to make their money. And that's why these teams have been so successful for so long. Yes, it doesn't translate to the World Series every year, but go ahead and talk about the World Series without mentioning the Yankees or the Dodgers as being competitors for the trophy. Like it hasn't happened in years. I think the Yankees, the last time they finished last in the AL was 1998 or something like that. I've read a stat on that. And, the Dodgers and the Yankees have the most World Series titles in the history of baseball. And, the Cardinals are a big market. They're in second place. These big market teams have more sustained success because their owners are willing to shell out the cash. Now, if they could do something like they do in hockey with baseball and set a minimum, that'd be better to see. But at the same time, the owners are never going to agree to that anyway because they're greedy and they want to keep their own money in their own pockets. And some of them don't even really care how the team does. They just want to make money.
I think the owners have too much say in what happens in that type of situation. So like when the commissioner comes to them and says, hey, we're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z with the salary cap, like for instance, what you're saying, putting in a minimum threshold, the owners have too much say, in my opinion. I think that just to make the league more competitive overall, rather than having teams like the Pirates and the Rockies, and I know the Rockies beat the Phillies last night. I don't want to talk about it. But rather than have teams like that and then the teams like the Dodgers and Yankees, I think it'd be better if the owners didn't get a say so the commissioner can make the league as competitive as possible.
But like, look at teams like the A's and the Rays. I mean, they compete every year for sure, but like they don't. I mean, the fact that the Rays got to the World Series last year is awesome, but in terms of long-term sustained success, it's just not going to happen. Like that even with the A's, like their owners just don't spend the money, and that's the result. I mean, the A's, they were a great ball club in the early 2000s. There's a movie about it, Moneyball. I suggest you watch it. It's probably one of my favorite sports movies ever. About how the GM is handcuffed because he can't sign any of his best players. They had to, build from scraps, and they did a very good job. But they just fundamentally weren't a good baseball team because they don't spend the money for good players. So that, to me, salary caps kind of work because if you look at other sports like basketball, like you get all these dudes on this, like you have these super teams now. So I mean, obviously it doesn't matter in basketball, but in football, it kind of works. To me, I think there should be kind of a minimum salary in every sport and like maybe a high cap in all sports, but I don't know. I don't even think that would work, to be honest with you, because you just get these players and they all join up and they take slight pay cuts so that way they can stay together and win games. I mean, look at the Bucks.
Yeah,
They just re-signed every starter from the Super Bowl year because
Yeah.
Tom Brady took a pay cut.
All right, that's gonna do it for us today on BSing Sports. Thanks everybody, and just so you guys, Ryan has one more point. Go ahead, fire away.
One more note. Speaking of great movies, if you want to look at how corrupt owners in baseball have been forever, go look at the movie 8 Men Out. It's about the Black Sox scandal. If you don't know what Black Sox scandal is, Google probably works, especially on the device that you're watching this on. So highly recommend it. It's a very good movie.
On that note, again, we're going to get out of here. We're in the process of trying to create a website for ourselves, so look out for that in the next couple of weeks. Woo! But follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, hit us up on Twitter. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Another